everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're doing another reaction video. This time it is to a documentary called I Am a Witch. Now, I actually got a DM on Instagram about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, asking if I could react to this video. And it's actually been in my watch list for a long time and I just never ever got around to it. So I figured, why don't we do a full reaction to it? If you've got any videos that you would like me to react to surrounding witchcraft and paganism, feel free to send them to me on Instagram or in the comment section, and I'll do what I can to get round to watching them all. So, with that being said, why am I reacting to these videos? If you are new to my channel, hi, my name is Hearth, I'm a practicing witch and I'm really passionate about learning and teaching witchcraft. I love seeing other people's perspectives on witchcraft, and I often find that when it comes to social media, a lot of the additional context is lost. So when I do reaction videos, it is never to shame the people in the videos, it's never to say that they're wrong and I'm right. Instead, it's simply to add context from a different magical practitioner, perhaps a different stance on the subject, or a different way of doing things, perhaps a different opinion, so that we can learn and grow better as a community. And I often get to learn so much from the people in these videos as well, which I think is just a really nice experience. Just before I dive in though, I will say that I'm not going to be posting the full video in this video. That simply wouldn't be fair to the original creators who take so much time and effort to make these videos. So instead, if you want to watch the entirety of the video, I will leave it linked in the description box, and I would suggest that you check out their channel, check out their content, give it a like, give them a follow, perhaps even comment if that's something you feel inclined to do, and share the love and appreciation, because this kind of content is not the most well received on social media, and it's also very, very time consuming. The video is an hour and 22 minutes long. So I will warn you, if you're going to watch the entirety of it as I am today, you might want to drink. I have brought with me my witch's brew mug full of water because I know I'm going to need it. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. You will know before I do, I'm sure. So brace yourself, you might want to do this in small sections. So with that being said, I'm going to shuffle over so that I can put the video on the screen over here, and let's see what it's all about, because I have never watched this video. It could be about absolutely anything and I would have no idea. If it's not about what I think it's going to be about though, you probably won't see this video at all. So, let's see.
Well, there's a deep concern right now with witchcraft in today's society. I think if you look at magic in the mainstream media, especially in children's movies, one in particular comes to mind that popularized sorcery and magic, spellcasting, etc. And I think you can guess which franchise I'm talking about. And this all relates to the practice of witchcraft and what witchcraft is all about at its core. Some may argue that it's harmless and there's nothing wrong with the belief in magic or casting spells, but what they're doing essentially is trying to control and manipulate forces outside of themselves. But the practice of spells and magic, I guess the problem comes because they operate solely on the level of imagination and not in reality, which I think over time can hinder and distort one's growth, especially with our children.
Okay, just straight off the bat, I have no idea who is speaking here, but it kind of sounds like someone who has not strongly interacted with really any of the witchcraft community, because the majority of pagans and witches that I know personally are some of the most grounded, most practical, physically minded people I have ever met. They are the kind of people who will take their kids out into nature and spend so much time working with them and nurturing them, teaching them about gardening and about cooking and about the natural world and respect for the natural world. I think it's important that just because someone follows a particular spiritual practice or a particular craft, that we don't speak of them as being a collective with one mindset. There are going to be people within the witchcraft community who do live very strongly in imagination, but that also applies to people outside of the witchcraft tradition. Everyone's unique, we all have different ways of dealing with life and dealing with the world around us, and I don't think that sweeping statements like this are particularly helpful.
Okay, so at the first of the month, put a handful of 3 fingers of cinnamon powder in the palm of your hand. Go to the door of your house or work with intent. Blow cinnamon from outside. I am not one that says stuff out loud, but if you like to say stuff out loud, you can say, when the cinnamon blows, abundance will come to stay. And then you allow the cinnamon powder to remain on the floor for at least 24 hours. So.
Okay, this working is really, really popular. I know I'm already butting in, but I just want to make a few really important statements here. This working has made its rounds on social media for the last 5-10 years. It's really, really popular. It isn't, however, safe in all circumstances, and I do feel the need to reiterate this. You are going to be having fine cinnamon powder floating around in your home. Cinnamon is an irritant. It will irritate your lungs. It's going to irritate your nose. It can cause nosebleeds. If you have asthma, it's going to cause you problems. If you have pets, if you have small children, it can be really, really harmful. There are many prosperity workings that you can do. You can adapt this working to not involve cinnamon. You can use cinnamon in a different way. I just think it's really important to be aware that this isn't going to be safe for everyone. As with all workings, just make sure that what you're doing is safe for your environment. If there's other people around, a lot of people have cinnamon allergies. It's not going to be safe for them, so just make sure that you're doing your research before you do any kind of working. And I'll be honest, you can probably do a more successful working that makes less of a mess, especially if you are timing it to appropriate days of the week and moon phases and that kind of thing. Not knocking this working, because you are welcome to do this working if you want, but there are many workings out there that I personally would choose over this that aren't going to leave a cinnamony mess everywhere, because that sounds like a lot of hassle to me.
I think you say it twice, technically. But I don't say, I think it's more about your intent than anything else. Okay, so no, she's just going to blow it from the door out.
Okay, I'm confused. Okay, so I'm a little baffled. Wait. Okay, so I think this is just kind of like a little bit of a mix-up of wording. Generally speaking, when you do a cinnamon style working like this, or kind of any abundance working like this, you would be blowing that energy or directing that energy inwards from the outside. So you are holding cinnamon, which is very good for attraction workings. That's why it's used in a lot of love magic. It is used in a lot of prosperity workings, especially for financial prosperity. And so what you are doing, you are standing outside and you are blowing it into your space. The idea being that like attracts like. You are essentially guiding that energy into your environment by using the cinnamon as the vessel to draw that energy inwards. If you do it the other way around, you are blowing that energy away from your home. So you are taking all of that prosperous energy that that cinnamon is representing, and you are blowing it away from your space. So you are drawing that energy away from you rather than pushing it into your environment. So you might find that this has the alternative effect if you have the mindset of the energy is going to follow where the cinnamon goes. You are essentially driving that energy outside. That might simply be me completely misunderstanding the working as a whole, but that's always what I've gathered this working to be. And that's what I gather the working in this video to be as well. So let me know what you think. Which way do you do it? Personally, I would do it the other way around to this. This to me seems really counterintuitive, but every practitioner is going to be entirely unique. A way of doing it, I suppose, is to perhaps set your intention that this is the kind of energy that you want to manifest. So you are almost blowing that energy out as a way of gaining a magical response from the environment around you. So you could think of it that way. I typically would do this the other way around though, but that's just me.
And everybody should just do it at the first of the month. See what happens.
Misconceptions that I have run into is that we're devil worshippers, we're in a relationship with the devil. We attack people or curse people needlessly. Just that we're evil, that we're not doing good. We don't respect anybody, and we just have anger and evil in our hearts and want to hurt them all.
And what do you think that comes from?
It comes from misconceptions from medieval times, the Middle Ages and everything, where people were afraid of what they didn't know. If there was someone who was more naturally gifted with herbs and nature, then it wasn't what they knew. They knew of their religion, and if anybody was different, it was bad. So that prejudice is from fear, and the imagination grows.
I do want to add in here that witches during this early modern period that's kind of being spoken about here were very, very different to the witches that we see today. And not all magical practitioners were treated with fear. Many of them were highly respected within the community. And I think the confusion mostly comes down to the fact that the word witch has actually been reclaimed. So you didn't want to be referred to as a witch during this time period. You would actively try to avoid it. You weren't self-identified. Instead, other members of the community would accuse you or refer to you as a witch. And it was a very derogatory thing that had a lot of consequences, especially when we look into the witch trial period. There were, however, many people who practiced what we today would consider to be magic or witchcraft that were not referred to as witches. These were the peddlers, the wise folk, the cunning men. These people were often revered within the community. They were actively sought out by everyday members, and this style of practice worked alongside the religion of the time. That's how we still have records of it to this day. So we still find written charms from the early modern period all the way up to the 18th, sometimes even the 19th century, that do reference the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. They have references to God and Jesus, the Christian faith in general. Psalms were often used because the practices were adapted to suit the religion of the time so that they were able to sustain themselves. But that's not to say that this time period doesn't still have a negative impact on practitioners today. The term witch has been reclaimed and now is often associated with things that are very different to how it was used historically, but a lot of the stigma and the associations with it have continued. So people are still accused of being devil worshippers, they're still accused of being evil. I've had people even in my own life tell me these things, and it's something that is so perpetuated within society, it's kind of really hard to escape from. And so there's definitely aspects of this time period that are still negatively impacting people to this day, especially in highly religious communities. We still see people making reference to the perceived or believed acts that these witches carried out during the witch trial period, such as signing your name in the devil's book, worshipping Satan, having a familiar or an imp that feeds on you, being in affiliation with demons and devils, and all of these things that often are fueled by misconceptions, especially in strongly religious groups. And while there are some people out there who practice witchcraft and work with the devil, there are people out there who practice witchcraft and work with demons, it's important to remember that not all witches are the same. And sadly, so many people paint all witches as being one thing, when actually we are incredibly varied and diverse as a community.
A few months ago, someone actually told me that she is not comfortable with witchcraft in her own life because she was taught growing up that witches performed animal sacrifice and, hurt people and things like that. And I mean, that to me is a wild misconception, but a lot of people who grew up in certain religions were taught things like that because historically that was kind of a driving force behind witches being hidden and misconceived in the first place.
We don't fly through the air on broomsticks. We don't worship any kind of devil because the devil is a Christian invention. The devil was modeled after a European forest god named Cernunnos because he had horns. And in the Middle Ages, invented the devil because they were misogynistic and because they were anti-nature. So they had to persecute everything that didn't go exactly in their path. So witches were said to worship the devil, and you can read lots of stories, about witches lining up to kiss the devil's rear end. That's nonsense. We are just ordinary people. Witches are ordinary men and women. There are men witches. They're not called warlocks. They're called witches.
Okay, so in this, I do think it is important to note, as previously mentioned, there are witches who do worship the devil and Satan and Lucifer and the different versions that we do see, because witchcraft in itself is not a religion. It is a practice, and people can add in any deities, spirits, entities, religions that they feel comfortable to add in. And so it is, as mentioned, a very varied practice. It is seen, though, in many of the trial records that people appear to have been chosen for a reason. It seems as though that whether it is their political stance, whether it is their appearance, their behaviour, something it is that they're doing is setting them apart from the rest of the community, and because of that, they are being selected or accused of being witches. The records, however, aren't necessarily something we can completely trust, because while in many places torture was not permitted, that doesn't mean that they weren't put into awful conditions. And if you are being tortured, or if you are in awful conditions for long periods of time, you are willing to say anything that your interrogator wants you to say if it means you get a little bit of respite. And because of this, we do see many of the trial records being somewhat swayed. There may be some truth in the records themselves. We see this especially in the case of Isabel Gowdy. There's a lot of information in her trial records that seem too informative, too understanding of the practice for it to not be based in some form of reality, but we just don't know how much is based off simply knowledge of a practice, perhaps practiced by other people, and how much of it was influenced by the people who were asking the questions. And yet, despite it being several hundreds of years after the trials took place, we are still put into these boxes by people outside of the community, and they often aren't willing to learn. One final thing on this section, because I know I'm talking a lot, is that many practitioners refer to themselves as different names. Some will refer to themselves as witches, and yes, witch is a gender-neutral term. It doesn't matter how you identify, you can refer to yourself as a witch. Other terms are slowly being reclaimed by the community. Some people will refer to themselves as magicians, as mages. Some will even refer to themselves as warlocks. That's an individual choice. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will refer to themselves in the same way. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Let's keep going. Because I'm 5 minutes in.
A lot of times witches can be Wiccan, but not all Wiccans are witches. In the Wiccan religion, they don't believe in Satan, they don't believe in the devil. So that's a huge misconception for people, is that we worship the devil, we like spells, and we're slaughtering animals and small children, and we ride broomsticks and have green skin and wear the pointy hat and the long black dresses, but that has nothing to do with our magic, with our craft.
One of the most annoying things about practicing witchcraft right now is that people don't really have a frame of reference for it, and so they think that it's very they're very new agey, which it really isn't, and I can explain to you why that's true. And B, that it's like irrational or somehow ridiculous, that if someone is a witch, that they believe that they have powers that just can't be real, that they have some kind of idea that it's like Harry Potter, that we live in this fantastical world that is really trying to escape from reality. And I would say that is the exact opposite of witchcraft, what witchcraft is and what witchcraft does.
I like the fact that immediately in this, we're getting some very different answers from different people. They do say that if you ask 12 witches one question, you will get 13 different answers, and this kind of applies to this as well. Within my own experience, I have found that people will tend to swing one extreme or the other. It's either that you are a devil worshipper, that you do animal sacrifice, that you are evil, that you curse people for fun, that you are a mythical creature. I get that one a lot, that witches aren't human. When witches are humans, we just practice witchcraft. It's a craft, it's an art, it's a skill that we learn and develop. And then on the other side of the coin, you have the people who are accustomed to witchcraft through the lens of social media, and so they perceive witchcraft as being a TikTok trend, as being something that you see in movies and TV shows, and people are just role-playing, or it's a giant D&D game, or it's just fantasy. And in reality, neither of those stances are true. In fact, witchcraft is the influence of so many of these things. Witchcraft is the influence behind a lot of these movies and TV shows. The popularity in witchcraft was because of the lack of control that people had in the world, especially during 2020. We saw a massive popularity boost in witchcraft because it was a way that people could express themselves, could experience the world through a different lens, and could also offer a sense of comfort and, in many cases, control during what was a very, very difficult time for so many people. Not all of the people who practice witchcraft during 2020 will still practice it today, but if it helped them during that time frame, that is just as real as everything else is. It isn't fantasy, it isn't fiction, and for many practitioners, it is a massive part of their lives that will stay with them for decades. It isn't living in a fantasy world, and as I mentioned at the very, very start, if anything, witches are some of the most grounded people that I've ever met. They do have one foot in this world and one foot on the other, but they are still very much grounded here. They're present, they're aware, they know what's going on. And I think that's really lovely, and that's something that is so commonly missed. Also, in reference to the last one, Wicca and witchcraft are different. People often think that they are the same thing. One is a religion that became popularized in between the late 1930s, early 1950s by Gerald Gardner, and incorporates many witchcraft ideas. And so many people, even if they follow the Wiccan religion, they are still practicing somewhat an idea of witchcraft because it is kind of integrated into the religion as a whole, but they might not choose to carry out active spellwork and ritual outside of their religious practices. But not all witches are Wiccan, because witchcraft is considerably older as a practice. Folk magics are found all over the world, going back hundreds, probably many, many thousands of years. And so you can be a Wiccan and a witch. You can be a Wiccan and you can be a witch. You can be many other things as well, depending on what you feel comfortable with.
Well, I feel like witches are given a really bad rep and a bad name. And I remember even learning about, the Salem witch trials, and there was no magic happening in Salem. That was just a place where a bunch of witches got murdered. I don't think there was even that many practicing. I don't think there was practicing witches. I don't think that was. I think people need something to have a bad rap, and that ended up getting blamed on witches. I don't know. I feel like a witchcraft, they're not trying to harm anyone. Nobody's trying to harm anyone. Everything I've learned and understood is it's karma. So I don't see anyone going out of their way and intentionally doing something bad witchcraft wise to somebody else. So I do think that it's just something that people don't understand and turned into something in their head. They clearly never talked to a witch or asked a witch, because it's nobody, I don't know. We're not, even if you don't like somebody, we're not putting out bad spells on you. That would come back to me 3 times worse. I'm not gonna do, I don't think witches are out there making bad spells. I'm sure there are, but I don't think that that's a common, they get a really bad rap for that.
So I think it's very, very true that realistically, not a single person accused of witchcraft during the Salem trials, or probably many others, actually practiced witchcraft. It was one of those where they needed a scapegoat, they needed a reason, there was so much fear-mongering happening, and pamphlets were being published, and you had witch hunters, and you had the hammer of witches, and all of these things were raising people's fear. And then you also had the fact that many trials were not actually carried out in the proper ways. They were carried out in assizes, they were often done by especially travelling judges, and they would be paid if they manage to get a conviction. And so, of course, you have incentive right there for accusing and trying people as witches. However, I do think it's important to note here that karma and the threefold rule are not applicable to everyone, because they are part of specific traditions and religious and spiritual beliefs. There are many people out there who will curse. There are many people out there who enjoy cursing. That's not to glorify it. That's not to shine a positive spotlight on it or say this is something that you should do. That's just the reality of it. There are many people out there who will. And I also think it's important to note that there are many cultures and traditions where this style of practice is very significant. And so we can't necessarily erase it, because then it erases part of very culturally specific traditions, religions, and magical beliefs and practices. But yeah, during the trials, most people who were accused probably had nothing to do with witchcraft at all. Wrong place, wrong time, said the wrong thing, looked at someone wrong. I mean, there are a few cases where simply putting hot coals into a bucket of water was enough to get you accused of witchcraft. Just simple, everyday, mundane things could be enough. It was very rarely any actual practice of witchcraft.
As a wordsmith, I tend to look at the etymology of a word, and the word witch comes from the word wicce, W-I-C-C-E, and that means wise. So a witch is a wise person, and it doesn't have to be a woman. It can be a man. It can be any gender. It's really not specific to that. It's just about living your life in a wise way. The wise ways are living your life attuned to nature, living your life with the cycles of the season, and as a member of a community of sentient beings, and not a separate energy outside of that.
My personal definition of witch is someone who believes that they have a power to manipulate unseen natural forces to affect a goal.
I think, there's this common definition that a witch is like a woman with some kind of magical abilities or powers. I don't ascribe gender to a witch. Guys can be witches, non-binary folks can be witches. So to me, a witch is anyone who considers themselves to be a witch, who, is connected to a type of spirituality that includes, magic, nature, herbalism, things, anything really that can be considered part of the occult world.
For me personally, there's so many different definitions and versions of the word witch. For me personally, it just means somebody that is comfortable with themselves and may have a little bit or a lot of magic in them. They're unique. They're different. They may not be cookie cutter. The dictionary says it's, a woman that has supernatural and mystical powers. I don't think the word powers means what media thinks it means. You can be a healer, and that can be your power. That can be your superpower. So for me, witch is very personal, and just, it's what makes you special.
A witch is someone who uses the tools of witchcraft in order to engage with the natural world. So a witch is someone who uses spells, incantations, prayers, rites, rituals to connect with the spirits of the land, and as a tool for personal empowerment.
Well, the word witch is related to the word Wicca, which is said to be an Old English word that means strong or powerful or wise. Today, witch has a broader meaning, and it's mainly, I think, thanks to the social media. It's taken on a more glamorous, in the Hollywood kind of glamour, not the kind of glamour that means illusion, but Hollywood glamour, and it's supposed to be something romantic and fancy. And if a young woman says she's a witch, that means she's actually working on being maybe a seductress who uses magic. As I see witchcraft, it's a religion. We worship the goddess. I'm an initiated Dianic Wiccan.
Wiccan. Emphasis
which
on
means
Wiccan.
We worship the goddess. No, I pay attention to the pagan gods, but not to the standard brand religions. And I'm a very grounded witch because I don't go out and do a lot of glamorous things, glamorous in the Hollywood sense. You're not going to find me on Facebook doing that kind of stuff.
I wouldn't personally consider that particularly glamorous, but I think it's really important here to reiterate again that Wicca and witchcraft are not the same thing. And so if you are an initiated Dianic Wiccan, you may also choose to refer to yourself as a witch, but the next witch that you meet is probably not going to be an initiated Dianic Wiccan. They might follow a completely different path. They might not have a religious path at all. For me, the main thing that I use to describe a witch is someone who practices witchcraft. And then the practice of witchcraft is the ability and the technique of manipulating energy to achieve a desired magical result. That focus could be on the natural world, it could be on the elements, it could be on yourself, it could be working with gods and goddesses and spirits, but you are manipulating and bringing about change through your practice. And how you refer to yourself is entirely unique. You might want to refer to yourself as a witch, you might want to refer to yourself as something else.
Well, I didn't start calling myself a witch until I realized that when I'm sitting there and like concentrating on things and thinking about them and manifesting, when I realized that that was witchcraft was when I started calling myself a witch. So if you manifest a lot, or if you're just somebody who carries like a random rock or stone in your pocket, like you're a witch to me. Like that's... So, you know, even if you're not doing it intentionally with like the intent of carrying a rock around for good luck, I feel like you're doing that on accident anyways, or carrying the rock for whatever reason it's giving off. So that to me is what makes you a witch or defines a witch.
The word witch to me is that it's a person who identifies as a witch. Not everybody who practices paganism or even kitchen witchery identifies as a witch. If you identify as a witch, you're a witch. But you could be a Christian and still be a witch. It's very personal. It's a very personal journey.
There are some religions, specific religions, that have a witchcraft practice, Wicca being one of them. I'm not Wiccan, so I can't speak on the specifics of their religion, but it is a specific religion. Paganism is another, religion that many of the followers of paganism will call themselves witches. And then there are some, witches like me, folk witches, eclectic witches, who consider witchcraft our spiritual practice, but not necessarily an organized religion.
Witchcraft can be religious. For me personally, I don't consider it to be a religion, but I consider it to be analogous to religion. Some witches do believe in certain gods and goddesses, and they worship their pantheon and perform rituals and seek those specific deities like guidance and help in performing their magic. But for me personally, I worship nature. I worship the natural world, and part of my practice is developing things that I do in my personal life to connect me with nature and to also help preserve and protect nature.
I don't know if witchcraft is a religion per se. The religion is non-standard brand. It's an earth-based religion. It's called paganism. It's called neo-paganism. There are people who very assiduously worship the Norse pantheon. They call themselves atheists, because that word is related to the Norse pantheon. Pagan means people who live out in the country. That's another word invented by Christians. So we're pagans. We celebrate the 8 stations on the wheel of the year, which I will explain if you want me to. We worship in many different ways. We worship the old pantheons.
No, witchcraft, in my opinion, is not a religion. It is exactly what it is. It's a craft. It's not a hobby. It is a way of life. But you can be a Christian and still be a witch, because the Christian Bible is still full of wonderful messages. But you can still be naturally inclined and play with stones or practice kitchen witchery. Everything, it's just... you have to identify as a witch. You can't be like, oh, you're a Christian and you're a witch. No, it's that person has to say, I'm a witch.
I definitely know witches that would consider it a religion. I wouldn't call myself religious or feel like I'm a part of a religion, but that's because I'm not really praying to anything, which, like, as that was like my turn off to it and why I kind of was a little hesitant to even reading more about it was because I was like, I don't want to go into this praying. Like, I don't want to go into anything and feel like I am doing something wrong if I'm not praying. Like, that's when it kind of feels like religion. And I don't really feel like it's religion. I feel like it's more of a way of life than religion. But I'm also not waking up and praying to something. If I was praying to something, I'd probably feel like it was a little more religious.
When I'm explaining what I do and what I am to people, I'll use the word religion because they seem to be able to understand what that means more. For me, it's more of a spirituality. I guess you could call it a religion. But I'm very eclectic in my craft. I'm polytheistic. I believe in different gods and goddesses. So that's kind of a difficult question because people, when they hear the word religion, it's very organized, and I'm not into the organized religion per se. It's more of a mystical, if you will, spirituality.
So this is ultimately the dilemma that so many practitioners have. Depending on who you're talking to, how you describe your practice is going to be completely different. If you're talking to someone who understands the world through the lens of religion, then describing it as a religion makes a lot of sense to the person that you're talking to. And so you're probably more inclined to use the word religion to them than you would to, say, another practitioner. If you are uncertain of the stance of the person that you are talking to, you're perhaps more likely to refer to it as a spirituality. You're not putting it in any set boxes, you're using rather vague terms, and it makes the entire thing just a little bit more palatable. Whereas if you were to be talking to someone that you know that you can trust, like your friend who is really interested in it, you might be more willing to go further in detail. And then every individual's practice is going to be so different. As was mentioned here, if you are waking up every morning and you are actively carrying out prayer, even if that prayer is not to a deity of an organized religion, many people would perhaps consider that to be religion. Whereas to them, it might simply be something that they do every morning, a little bit like doing morning meditations or setting an intention or doing exercise in the morning. It might just be something that's part of their daily routine. And so, while witchcraft, for me anyway, is not fundamentally a religion, because it is a craft, it's an art that we practice, and it is so varied and diverse, every single person you talk to is going to have a completely different stance on how that fits into their own lives, as well as how that might appear to external people. And that's where these questions become kind of tricky to answer, because depending on who you're talking to, you're probably going to give a slightly different version of it. And in some cases, you might completely minimize or water down your own practice because it makes it more palatable to the person that you're talking to.
For pentagrams, not pentacle, I don't know too much about pentacles, but the pentagram is fire, water, air, ground, and then I think your soul is the final star point.
So typically a pentagram and a pentacle have similar representations. So they are designed to represent often protection, but also unity among all of the elements. So you have earth, air, fire, water, and spirit representing the different points. The difference between a pentacle and a pentagram is a 5-pointed star. A pentacle is a 5-pointed star that is enclosed within a circle. And for many people, if you were to turn a pentacle upside down, so the point is downwards, it then also becomes a pentagram, but that's varied person to person. Generally speaking, if it's a 5-pointed star without a circle, it's a pentagram. If it's a 5-pointed star with a circle, it's a pentacle. And many people, myself included, will wear pentacles and pentagrams to represent their practice as well as to represent that protective, unifying energy.
Magic is, for me, I spell it Magick. And the reason I spell it that way is the G is the ground or Mother Earth. And that is connecting us to that divine feminine energy, that groundedness, that the cycles of the earth. And then the K reaches towards the sky, and that's Father Earth, and that's more the ephemeral ideas. That's the idea of taking an idea that lives in the cosmos.
So, I've never heard of anyone using it for that reason before, but many people differentiate between magic with a C and magic with a CK to be the difference between stage magic, magicians that are pulling rabbits out of the hat on the stage, and magic as in the magical practice, the magical arts, occultism, witchcraft. And so they'll use the CK to differentiate between them. Some people will use a J instead of a G. Some people will just use a K instead of a CK. Some people will just spell it with a G and a C. Everyone's going to be slightly different. Personally, I use a G and then a CK because it does differentiate it for me between stage magic and witchcraft.
Magic is how one way we do things. We work in very practical ways. You know, I mean, if you don't want to get a ticket on your car, you move your car. But magic is another way to do things, and it uses energy. And you don't always see the energy. People don't always feel the energy, but we set it up and we use it, and it often works.
There are so many different kinds of magic, and a lot of the magic that we do it has to do with our intentions. You know, it's not like, hey, I want $1 million, you know, abracadabra, you know, point my wand. And, you know, if I'm not taking any actions, you know, to go out and, you know, earn or find or whatever, the $1 million, you know, isn't just going to come to me. That's not the way magic works for me.
For me, the role magic plays is it's just one more tool in the arsenal of my life. If there's something that I can't figure out a way to get done by, you know, mundane means, then I will cast a spell. If that means, you know, seeking an answer to a particular problem or protecting myself from forces outside of myself, be that other people or be that, you know, harm from the world, I don't know. I would say magic plays the role in bringing me peace of mind and also giving me a sense of empowerment.
So magic to me is, well, not just magic, but the practice of witchcraft to me is an assistant to life. It's not a substitute to mundane action. We're not doing it to achieve the impossible without putting in any of the work. It is instead a way of boosting the work that we are already doing to manifest it stronger and quicker. It is a way of working our energy, whether that is our personal energy, the energy of our servitors, our guides, our guardians, our gods, goddesses, familiars, whatever it is that you are working with, to aid in manifesting a result that conforms with your will. As was mentioned here, it's very much that alignment with goals and intentions. But very specifically, it is not a replacement for work. It is an assistant to it.
They're just tools. You don't need them. But it's good when you're doing something to have a concrete symbol to hold in your hand. If you're familiar with the tarot, you know that the tarot has 4 suits. And they are, if I can remember them, swords and wands and cups and air. And witchcraft uses what is called an athame, or a ceremonial knife. And usually it's a double blade and it has a black handle, and you use it you don't stab stuff with it, you don't cut stuff with it, you cut air with it. You've heard about wands. I've got a whole bunch of wands. I don't have a knife. I did, but I haven't had one in a long time. And wands you use to point and to touch. Water conveys emotion. So if you have a chalice, we call it a chalice, it's a glass. It can be a bowl. And water conveys emotion, and it can be cleansing. And air just moves things around.
So in the tarot, you have the swords, the wands, the pentacles, and the cups. And they represent, in that order, air, fire, earth, and water, and they are the symbolic elements that you would work with in many forms of witchcraft and specifically Wicca. And you can use these tools within witchcraft, so you can use an athame, which depending on your tradition can be used for cutting. Within Wicca it is not, but within witchcraft it often is. You can also use a bowline, which is a cutting form of an athame. Usually a bowline is curved. Then you can use the chalices as representation for water, to give offerings, to give libations, and to consume things after a ritual or ceremony is carried out. A wand is designed to aid in directing energy, but as is previously mentioned, all of these things are additions to your magical practice. They are not requirements, they can help focus on your intention, but you don't need them to be successful. And the tools that an individual uses is going to be entirely unique to their style of practice.
My hope for witchcraft is that it becomes more and more specific to place and time. So the witchcraft that we practice, or that I practice here in Los Angeles, is going to be different than the witchcraft that's practiced in like Kansas. And my hope is that the witches of the future bring their own background, their own knowledge, their own places into the work, and to let the spirit of the land and the spirits of their own relationships and connections inform that work. I'm looking forward to like a literature of witchcraft, you know, witches are poets, witches are artists, witches are healers, are dancers, are actors, and I'm looking forward to like the arts being a steward of witchcraft in the world and letting it find its own voice. I'm really looking forward to and hoping that we can just get over this idea of like witchcraft as like a spooky, sensational thing. I just don't want to talk about that anymore. Like, I'm done. I don't want to talk about that anymore. It's really boring. It's just not like that. And I hope that we can just all get over that. I feel like witches have a much more interesting point of view to express in the world, which is about their relationship to the natural world and the rituals of honoring the sacred within the natural world and our connection to it. And, you know, witches are environmentalists, they're ecologists, and I think it's just more interesting to talk about that rather than always coming back to the same thing, which is like, is witchcraft about Satanism? Like, where's your warty nose? Like, that's just so boring. I don't want to talk about it ever again. Like, so I think that the more witchcraft gains in popularity, the less kind of groundwork that we have to do every time to like get people to understand what witchcraft is. There's just more interesting things to say about it than just like that it's not about cursing people, you know? Like it's just frustrating to have to go back to square one every single time.
I'm hoping it will be more obvious, like there'll be more people that are open about what they're doing. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening. Like what I was saying before about social media, and you have a difference of opinion or just difference in your lifestyle, you get it from all sides because you're different. I'm really hopeful that people will be more accepting, if you will, and that more people will be more apt to come out of the broom closet, so to speak. But I'm really skeptical if we're going to be allowed to do that. So I'm hoping that technology doesn't take away certain aspects, certain personal aspects of the craft. I'm hopeful, but skeptical.
I believe that as we begin to recognize our vulnerability, we begin to recognize more of our humanity. And the more we become human, the more everyone's going to be accepted, even witches.
I think I see it being more accepted, hopefully, you know. But like I was saying, how in the UK they have a witch newspaper, like I hope we have that.
The thing is though, even in the UK, that still happens. Witchfest Croydon last year, so 2023, had people protesting outside of it, simply because they'd found out that a gathering of witches was happening. So just because we have things like the witch newspaper, which is really, really cool in itself, doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have any of the issues that are seen often in America and places further afield, because we do. There are still extreme people. It's just because we don't have a Bible Belt, it's not seen in quite the same way. I'd love to say that I see witchcraft as being mainstream in the future, but I think ultimately I'd rather it not be. And that sounds awful, so just bear with me on that. But when something becomes mainstream, it becomes watered down. It becomes minimized. The importance of it and the significance of it, the impact of it becomes reduced and becomes lessened. And I don't think that witchcraft deserves that. Instead, in an ideal world, I hope that collectively as people, we are simply more accepting. Because we see it even now, people think that they're very open and they're very accepting, and then something challenges their worldview and they panic and they shut down and they lash out and they're harsh and they're cruel. And I think that fundamentally, I would like witchcraft to be more accepted rather than necessarily being more mainstream. I hope that everyone collectively is able to acknowledge that if you don't understand something, that doesn't make it scary. And I hope that as practitioners, we can also be aware of how our actions maybe will impact the way we are perceived as well. I think that by watering down our craft, we are almost doing ourselves a disservice, because then the people who are learning from us are learning a watered down version of the craft. And ultimately, you have older practitioners who think that younger practitioners are not practicing witchcraft at all. They're actually just doing it for the aesthetic and this, that, and the other. And I completely understand why. But equally, some of that comes from the fact that the practice and the craft has been sugar-coated to become more appealing because of people's really extreme reactions. So it's almost like a multitude of things that I wish would change. I wish that people would be more open to learning and more accepting, because then I think that we will have to water down our practice less, and then ultimately I think every practitioner will benefit from that. I wasn't sure what to expect with this video, but I actually really enjoyed it. Getting to listen to the interviews of many different practitioners gives so much insight on the conversation and the topic as a whole, and it was just really enjoyable. If you want to watch this video for yourself, I would very much recommend that you do. I will leave it linked in the description box. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It really means a lot to me. If you've got any questions, comments, concerns, or video ideas, feel free to put them down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. So with that being said, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous, magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!